Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee and Headlines, our daily get together live here on Facebook, where we discuss Let's go again, slowly. Welcome to Coffee and Headlines. We discuss headlines, topics. See, now I've lost my train of thought. We discuss things that make our life better here in sunny Puerto Vallarta, as Julie McCoy used to call it. From headlines that we read in the newspaper to questions, tips, comments, suggestions, news about new openings, all kinds of things that can help us have a better life here in town as a community of English-speaking locals. It's always a pleasure to join you in this community that you've created, that I'm a part of. Luna, where the hell do you think you're going? Always showing your shady side to the camera. I love it. Thank you so much for that, little girl. If you're new to the broadcast, my name is Paco. That would be Luna, my secretary. She takes all my phone calls, gives me messages, and writes down the show notes for you to enjoy after each broadcast. So if you don't get a quick answer, sometimes when you write, it's because she's slow at typing. Anyhow, if you're new to the broadcast, let us know by writing the word new in your comments. And that way we'll give you a good welcome. And if, of course, you have any important questions that you wish to address, and questions are most certainly encouraged today, because we're going to talk about a topic that will probably bring out some questions, please add the letter Q at the beginning of your comment or question, and that way we'll try to get to it during the broadcast. I think we're ready. Let us take a quick look at who is joining us today. A quick sampling of Craig. I've been going through withdrawal of your restaurant. I want to go back and enjoy some tacos and beer sometime soon. I'm hoping to coincide with you, actually, so maybe we can set up a date. And if not, I'll go and have a good time with your staff, of course. Mijal is considering a walk to the market. I assume you mean the one at the Libramiento that we showed you last week. Jesse, it's always good to see you. I'm excited that you're here. More people have watched Closure, the film that my niece is starring on. We'll be hopefully get ready to discuss it sometime in the near future with her and with the director, her husband, and with maybe some other members of the cast. Let's see. Dan has guests in the house. Good for you. Christy is saying hello. This is wonderful. Lázaro Cárdenas is in the house. My goodness. Let's see. Kyle says, been seeing a lot of red tide in the ocean. How concerned should we be about swimming in it? There's an ocean? I didn't know there was an ocean. No, I'm just kidding. I have not noticed the red tide, and I have not noticed the guidelines provided by the government as to whether it is safe or not to swim in it. But they usually post these things at the beaches if it has become unsafe. I have certainly not read anything to that effect. Let's see what else. Oh my God, Sherry went to the market early today. That's great to hear. And Betsy enjoyed watching Closure and would like to see more of Katya's. Well, Katya is also in another series produced by Amazon. It's a children's series called Just Add Magic. She's done a bunch of television commercials, and she's been a guest star in some crime series such as Law and Order, I think. Her whole resume is up somewhere. But I'm glad that you guys are watching the film. It'll mean a lot to her when she hears these news. Remember when you asked to use when you also use T for identifying tourists on broadcasts, like N for new? Did we ever do that, Joe? I actually do not remember saying T for tourists. What I do remember saying, and we say this frequently, is that this is not the best forum or environment or show for someone who's coming as a tourist, just because we are more concerned about our livelihood as English speaking locals. Um, and we certainly would not want to use the T for tourists here because again, there are so many resources for people visiting our city online and elsewhere that I feel strongly about continuing our emphasis about locals. Now, if you feel differently about that, I would love to read your comments and would love to learn more about it. Let's see, what else do we have? Uh, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. A bunch of you have watched Closure. Good for you. That's so sweet. Okay. Oh, and happy birthday, Julie Levine. If I passed you and I didn't notice your birthday, happy birthday. Where is my birthday sound? Let's use this one. Anyhow, um, thank you, Carmen, for that remark about Elixir. This is the bar that we mentioned yesterday. I was unsure as to how they were operating during the daytime, and I reached out to them. It turns out that they have both a liquor and a restaurant license, so that makes excellent sense. And that's good to hear. We love the word of mouth. And let's see what else. Oh my goodness, everybody's watching Closure. Oh my God, I'm gonna let them know. Yay! So we have news, and then we don't have a lot of news because we want to make sure that we have enough time to discuss Luna. Bye bye. To discuss this issue of regatear. We've been talking about the fine art of bargaining and how it is done in Mexico, and when and why you should do it, and when and why you should consider not doing it. Um, Before we move on into that, and one more thing about restaurants and bars and that whole thing, and this is certainly not directly related to Elixir. I had a couple of conversations with restaurant friends yesterday about how all of a sudden there are all these bars with restaurant license, which makes sense if they want to serve liquor and food during the daytime. This is part of the times, or a sign of the times. Of course, I try to reach out to the city's licensing department in which my friend Luis Tello works. Luis Tello is, I believe, the subdirector of licensing here in Puerto Vallarta, and I got in touch with him out of curiosity with three very simple questions. Number one, how much does it cost to obtain a liquor and restaurant license in Puerto Vallarta? Number two, what criteria does the government apply to either grant or deny these permits? And number three, is there a cap or is there a limit to the number of restaurants with bar licenses or vice versa that are approved in Puerto Vallarta on a yearly basis? But as a good local politician, Luis Tello, who is the subdirector of the licensing department in Puerto Vallarta, did not return my message. And that's all I'm going to say. So now, the news. There is good news for the state of Nayarit. I'm always inclined to say there are good news, but I know better than that. I was corrected by my spell checker that there is, not are, good news for the state of Nayarit. Yesterday, Governor Antonio Echeverria informed that starting on Monday, the state moves to yellow in the federal COVID stoplight rather. This means that the measures we've been implementing, he said, are working, but it is also important not to let our guard down. We must continue to use a face mask. wash our hands, and keep a safe distance and stay home if we have nothing to go out for. Sounds familiar? Well, we know the drill. Moving on, of course, yesterday we talked about natural gas shortages in the United States and their impact here in town. And as we mentioned yesterday, they have resulted in increasing problems with local public transportation. And as a consequence, a higher risk of spreading COVID at bus stops where people have to wait for buses to arrive, oftentimes standing in close proximity. And Texas Governor Gregor Abbott has indicated that the exportation of natural gas to Mexico will not resume until tomorrow. But on the other hand, we know from Unibus PV, the local public bus company, that they ran out of gas 2 days ago. What does this mean? It probably means that if you need to catch a bus to get somewhere, you're going to probably have to wait a long time, or the bus may not even come. An Uber driver told me yesterday that it's been great for them, but needless to say, it's more than important to follow health guidelines these days if you are relying on public transportation. I see that the mystery radio sound is back. I've heard it sometimes, but I certainly have nothing to do with it today, or at least I don't think so. I haven't started any broadcasts. And let me very quickly and briskly move on to the weather so that we have enough time to chit chat about regateo in just a little while. Good news, everybody's back in the Paris Agreement. Bad news, you're still screwed, says the weatherman. It's 25 degrees here in town. It feels like 26. That would be 79 Fahrenheit. Humidity is at a 62%. And as we mentioned yesterday, we can expect a clear day today with a high temperature 27, low temperature 17. Tomorrow it will be a clear day as well. High temperature 27, low temperature 18, a little warmer. And there's a warm trend here. Clear through the day on Monday with high temperature 29 and low temperature 19. And this is, of course, wonderful news to have. Let me see a quick look at your comments to make sure that we haven't missed anything important. I hope the radio you all hear is not disturbing the broadcast, and I hope the radio you hear is at least pleasant. Moving right along with our headlines, I found two awesome features on PBS NewsHour yesterday. The first one, of course, concerning the landing of NASA's Perseverance rover on Mars. I know that there are at least a handful of space geeks among you, so enjoy the ride. Take a look at some of the first pictures and images that the rover has sent back to Earth. And of course, you will find out that they're still calibrating the vehicle and they're not going to start moving it until later. I am most intrigued about the fact that there is a flying drone that they're going to deploy. We've seen this on science fiction movies. Will be the first time that a surveillance vehicle will actually fly around Mars to, check out the scene, check out where they're going to put the next Starbucks or the next OXXO. We never know. We never know. And the next thing that I found came also from PBS NewsHour on trumpet player, composer, and jazz ambassador Wynton Marsalis, who discusses writing and recording his new composition, The Democracy Suite. If you're not familiar with Wynton Marsalis, he has been the artistic director of jazz at Lincoln Center for some time, producing amazing video content for us to enjoy online. He has won at least 9 Grammy Awards, and there was this one year in which he won in both classical and jazz categories on the same year. His 1997 2.5-hour oratorio, Blood on the Fields, about the history of slavery in the United States, was the first jazz composition to win the Pulitzer Prize for Music. So this is highly, highly recommended if you enjoy jazz and you enjoy a phenomenal educator. And now, let us get into the whole business of regatear. Several of you are. Let me create a quick pool, a quick poll, because I'm curious. Let me see. Why are you interested in regatear? And option one is going to be I want to save a few pesos. Option number two is going to be I'm just curious culturally. And what other reason might you be interested? I want to learn a few phrases in Spanish. I want to learn a few phrases in Spanish. So let us have this little survey, and we're gonna put it out there just because I'm curious as to why are you intrigued about regatear, and we will talk about this briefly. Let me take a quick look at what your comments are. In a second, we will take a look at the results of the survey, but it should be appearing on your screens right about now. Um, Meanwhile, I learned that Angelica says that if they don't inform the people about what's going on with the buses, to there is no way to know what's going on. I actually haven't looked at the Unibus PB Facebook page. I would imagine that would be the place where where they would post some kind of information. Um, let's see. James thinks they should move all the Starbucks to Mars. Good Lord. Um, Robert throws in some comments about both Winton and his brother Branford. Yes, that family is absolutely gifted when it comes to music. Let's see what else. And Troy also chimes in about Wynton Marsalis from his hometown in New Orleans. Very talented musical family, absolutely. Vendors expect you to bargain or they don't respect you. I'm not so sure that I agree with that, James. We'll take a look at at um, the results of the survey and some of the cultural things that I'm going to share with you. Michael adds an option number four. I don't like always paying the gringo price. Well, we want to talk about that. Karen throws in an opinion, and actually, I see enough responses here. I'm going to keep the survey online, but as of right now, I see that 16% of you want to save a few pesos. 59% of you, the majority, is just curious culturally. 24% of you want to learn a few phrases in Spanish. Well, we will find out how this whole issue of regatear is appropriate in some times and increasingly questionably appropriate in these times of COVID pandemic. Let us start by knowing what it is. Regatear is, of course, the Spanish word for bargaining or haggling, a type of negotiation in which the buyer and the seller of a good and service debate the price and the exact nature of the transaction. If the process results in an agreement, then the transaction takes place. That is just your basic no-brainer definition of what bargaining or regatear is all about. But bargaining in this context should not be confused with dickering, which involves petty, advantageous bargaining. We all know that we want to get a good deal here, there, and everywhere, but then we also know that there are some people that become somewhat obsessive about trying to get the best deal possible and sometimes can be advantageous. An example right now, there are a lot of providers that are interested in selling their goods or services or hotels. And they are bringing their prices down just to try to keep the market active. So when you are aware of the fact that you are being sold something at a very reduced price just to get it moving, and on top of that, you get involved in dickering or being petty or asking for even more, then that's not regatear. That is just being advantageous, and that is not what we want to talk about here today. Regatear should also not be confused with negotiating, although the differences can be somewhat subtle, at least here in Mexico, because when two individuals negotiate, there's an exchange of advantages and disadvantages. In one way or another, both parts win. Whereas in the process of regatear, there is always one winner, and that winner is the person that turned out to be the most stubborn in the process. So it can be a fun adventure, but it can also damage what was or could have been a very productive business relationship. If you go out and try to regatear with a vendor somewhere, the vendor may yield to your demands, but the vendor might say, ay, pinche culero, I don't ever want to conduct business with this person anymore. Or you might attempt to regatear in the wrong place or in the wrong context, and you might actually offend somebody. Um, so, when and where do we engage in regatear? Should we decide to be adventurous? Let's start with the when. I think there are three specific situations, and I'm seeing all your comments go by. We'll get to your comments in a second. I think there are three specific situations where you might consider engaging in regateo. Number one would be when the asking price is higher than market value. For example, take my fabulous new hat, the one that I've been wearing on my walks. I saw it at the Mercado of the Rio Cuale for like 280 or 300 pesos. On the other hand, I found it at another market for 80 pesos. So this is one of those instances in which you might want to say to the vendor at the Rio Cuale, hey, I've seen this elsewhere for a lesser price. That is a situation which is unfortunately very common here in Puerto Vallarta, being a tourism destination, that if you look like a tourist, they will try to charge you like a tourist. Another instance in which we might consider engaging in regateo is when the client is a valuable client. You know, if you have been a client of a vendor for some time and you are offered a price and you make a face, the vendor might turn around and say, well, because it is you, I'll give you a better price. Por tratarse de usted or por tratarse de ti. In this case, you know, the vendor yields because the vendor knows that you will continue buying from this particular vendor, and that might prove to be advantageous. Another instance when regateo is a good idea is when the seller is not offering added value. For example, if you buy a piece of furniture, but no delivery is included, then you may want to, try to regatear and make sure that you are getting some kind of added value. Again, always in the spirit of game, not in the spirit of being advantageous. Regateo, a lot of people think that this is something that is very popular in Mexico, but in fact, Mexico is not the only country where it takes place. For example, it is in Indonesia where most of the population engages in regateo. 66% of the population does it, and it is done everywhere from street markets to hotels, for example. You would never bargain in a hotel here in town. Unless, it was a small hotel and you were familiar with them and you were staying a gazillion nights, you may actually ask for a better rate, but it would be very rare to do that. Indonesia, we said that 60% of the population engages in bargaining. India has a 61% bargaining population. Mexico is low. In Mexico, regateo is only 39% of the population gets involved in regateo. And I wonder if you're curious to know what is that Mexicans bargain the most on. If you have an answer or a guess, feel free to put it in your comments. And we'll take a look at that. And then, of course, I'll let you know where it is that we are more bound to regatear. So even though Mexico is only 39%, regatear is most definitely a part of our cultural idiosyncrasy, but it pays to know when and where to do it and how to do it, but perhaps most importantly, where and when not to do it, it is the most appropriate. For starters, you have to have a certain amount of Spanish skills or be walking with a Spanish-speaking person that can help you to learn whether you are being shafted or you are being offered a fair price. In Mexico, for example, you would never regatear at a restaurant or a department store or any place where a price is already listed. Um, some independent artists and artisans may enjoy the game of regatear, but others may feel immediately insulted, as particularly if you're not aware of the time and effort involved in producing something. I have a friend of mine that is an artisan, and I've seen the price of some of his pieces, and I know that the price may seem high at first glance because you think, well, I'm buying something that is like just crafts, but when the time involved in producing it, hold on, I'm gonna cough. Ah, that was good. When the time producing something is a long time, then you have to know what the you have to have some awareness of the context of the time and effort involved in producing something. For example, consider this: if let's say that you are a small rural producer um, of organic tomatoes, for example. And let us keep in mind that, for example, small producers in Mexico are responsible for 40% of the food that we eat. But curiously enough, 7 out of 10 small producers in Mexico are poor. So you are one of those small producers. You grow organic tomatoes in your ranch, and you spend 6 to 8 months a year working up, getting up at dawn, working in your fields, an average of 6 hours a day under the sun, preparing the land. You're pruning, you're trimming, you're seeding, you're watering, you're looking after your plants, you're removing weeds, you're removing plagues. And then you harvest and package your tomatoes, and you get to the market and you sell 20 tomatoes for 15 pesos, for example. Then a buyer comes to you and says, well, sell me 20 tomatoes for 10 pesos and I'll take 40. Now, do you think as a buyer that, or as a seller rather, that it is fair to sell your 6 month work for 10 pesos? And this brings us to our reality. You know, we live in COVID times. So is it fair it is socially responsible to engage in regateo or bargaining today? Again, going back to the basic points, you know, if you can see that you are shamelessly being offered a price that is higher than market value, then regateo is definitely in order. Which brings me back to, where do we bargain the most in Mexico? And David nailed it by saying taxis or Uber. Mexicans bargain about taxi fares more than anybody else. I actually don't bargain taxi fares, but I always ask ahead of my ride, how much is it going to cost? And if I know that I've paid less in other instances, I can choose to say, no gracias, buen dia, which means no thank you, have a good day. Or I can choose to engage in regateo. More often than not, I'll simply, well, it depends. It depends on the engagement and what's going on. But let's go back to the hat that I mentioned earlier. You know, for example, you go to the Quale and you are offered the hat that I paid 80 pesos for elsewhere at 280 pesos. And you say to the vendor, well, I've seen it elsewhere at less than half the price. And the vendor might actually try to engage with you, or the vendor might say, well, this is the last price I can offer. Or you might actually consider that, you know, for me to be able to get my hat, you know, I had to go to a market where, if you remember the video, it was not necessarily the safest environment to be, and it may not be safe enough for you, and it may not be in the part of town where you're located. So even if you have to go, if you want to go to the Saturday market, you know, you may have to pay an Uber to get there and go back. Let's say that the Uber is going to charge you 80 pesos each way. So your hat is all of a sudden 160 plus another 80. Your hat is all of a sudden 240 pesos, which is not that far from what you would have paid for that hat at the Quale market. So there is always a lot of things to consider when we're talking about regateo and bargaining. If I was to wrap this up before looking at your comments, I would say that appreciate the context of where the prices are being negotiated or bargained. and appreciate the times that we're living in, and appreciate your own awareness of your environment culturally, and whether you act or behave as a local. For better or worse, tourists are always going to be handed the short end of the stick when it comes to these kinds of situations, and that's nothing I did or said. That's just the nature of the beast. The end. Let me take a quick look at your comments and suggestions through this section just to see where your mind is at. The numbers on the poll have not changed much, so I'm going to show the results in the video so you can all take a look at them. Bam. And I hope they are appearing in a couple of seconds. So very quickly, let's see. Um, let's see. Let's start with this one, which is the one that we talked about it. Vendors expect you to bargain or they don't respect you. I respect your opinion, James. As a local, I think it has more to do with not so much with respect as much as it has to do with trying to negotiate a better deal. Again, when both parties are coming from a place of prosperity and fun. I don't think it has much to do with respect, but I respect your opinion. Let's see. James has a lot to say about this. Prices are variable, so bargaining is built in. Again, it depends on the circumstances and the situation. Option number 4 from Joe Willis: don't want to insult anyone bargaining too low. Absolutely. How do you say we're not interested? Thank you in Spanish. I just say muchas gracias. Just say muchas gracias. Good point from Matthew. If the selling place is indoors and has a cash register, haggling is a no-no. Absolutely, because the seller probably pays both rent and taxes. I have liked that bargain, but since COVID, I stopped being a tightwad, and no, times have been rough for folks. I'm going to give you another example of that, Craig. I used to tip 15% at restaurants and 20% if service was exemplary. Now I don't go anywhere without tipping 20% at a minimum, and that's just me. Wow, James. You're an expert on this. This is great. Bargaining is for the market. Tianguis, not the supermarket or Costco. Again, well, traditionally it's been for the market Tianguis, but when one looks at the context as to where those goods came from and what it took to get the market or Tianguis goods to get there, then I begin to wonder if this continues to be a sensible reality in this time and age. Claude brings up an interesting point. It's all part of the experience and treasure hunting. See, for me, to have paid 80 pesos for my hat, my feeling was not, whoa, I saved some money. In fact, I gave her a little bit of extra money. I gave her 100 instead of 80. For me, it was the treasure hunting. It was the excitement of finding something unexpected. Let's see. I often pay the price lately because I know they are hurting due to lack of business. The reality, Jay, and I totally agree with you, is we are all hurting. We are all hurting. So I hear you. You know, even though when I may not have as much spending power as I used to, I continue to try to exercise kindness when I'm out there. Let's take a look. La la li, la 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 di, la li, la la. James doesn't see bargaining as taking advantage of anyone. Again, I think it is advantageous when you're being mean about it. And I see a lot of people, and this is not nationality specific, I see a lot of people that are out there to fuck with you, and make sure that they get the best possible price on something, and even being unkind, ungrateful, and unscrupulous in doing it. I think that is being taken advantage of, or taking advantage of a situation. Again, my opinion. Sometimes shopping around is better than bargaining, but a lot more work. But that work can be fun. If you enjoy the exploration, and for example, a lot of times I'll turn a shopping thing, like I'll turn it into a mission. I need a new switch for one of my ceiling fans, for example, and I know that there are 3 or 4 or 5 stores where I can go looking. So the COVID careful me says, well, I'm going to go to the fair store that I go because I should be home and I should not be spending a lot of time outside because that's what the authorities say. And the other side says, well, there are 5 ceiling fan stores in town. Let's go check out what they have. So it's a process of balancing a little bit of this, that, and the other. Let's see. In Hong Kong, I had to bargain at all markets. Got to be a long process, and I imagine the language also became an issue. I personally would feel very, very uncomfortable engaging in bargaining in a country where I'm not fluent in the local language. Is it right for the vendors to triple the prices for tourists? No. But for better or worse, the world that we live in, at least the economy that we live in, the Western world, has always been one of supply and demand. There are going to always be tourists that pay what they are told they're supposed to pay. And there are also always going to be sellers that take advantage of that. But again, James, it sounds like you've had, well, I don't know what it sounds like, but you have a lot of things to say about this business. I love it. Let's see. Thank you very much for that, Arturo. You need to know who to regatear. If it's a vendor in obvious need of making a buck, I'd rather not do it. That makes 2 of us. Es válido regatear, pero no hay que ser tan codo con los vendedores, says Carlos. I think that's absolutely true. And if you're wondering what that means, Carlos says it's valid to regatear, but you shouldn't be cheap with the vendors. Robert says, also with areas like PV that are so tourist economy based, if you can right now find a local charity and donate to help those in need right now, you push my button, Robert, and I have to throw in my personal opinion and personal disclaimer. Find a local charity and donate to help those in need right now is a really broad statement. We don't often talk about charities here at Coffee and Headlines because I personally have been shafted by enough charities in town as a board of director member, as a supporter, and as a volunteer, and as a person of the general public, that I always say when charities come up, ask questions, find out how the monies are going to be used, and make sure that the charity you choose is operating responsibly and openly and clearly about your involvement with that particular charity. Let's see. Yes, you cannot bargain on the Uber app, but there's another app, I even forget the name, that you can get in which you can determine the price of the trip. You can say on this other app, I think it's called Rappi? I don't remember. But there's another taxi application which you can say, well, take me from my home to the Malecon and I'm willing to pay 20 pesos. And there might be somebody out there that is willing to take the ride for such a small amount of money. And then there might be other drivers that might say, fuck this, that's ridiculous. So I don't engage with that other application just because I think it denigrates. Is that a word in English? Denigrates? It degrades somehow the other person. This is so true, Nigel. There's a fine line between haggling and bullying. It takes empathy to know the difference. Important to keep the ego out of the haggling. Absolutely. And again, I have business friends here in town, and the number of great stories that I hear from them of wonderful transactions thankfully outweighs the occasional horror stories that I hear from friends of mine that are bullied by customers. And it is unfortunately that this happens. Let's see what else. It happens with workers. You ask, how much do I owe you? And they turn it around to ask you, what do you want to pay? That is always an awkward situation, Dave. And unfortunately, part of being a successful business person is to put a value on your own work. And there are a lot of people that are shy about doing that, which creates for either a very funny or complicated or uncomfortable situation. Clarity for me goes above everything else. Dinga, 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 dinga. Regateo is optional. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, would I have regatear? Would I have regateated? That was Spanglish with my hat. I could have. I could have been an asshole with a woman that sold it to me and said, 80 pesos. Fuck that. It's just made of straw. And I could have said, I'll pay you 50. And you know what the sad thing is? She may have actually sold it to me for 50 pesos. But that's just being mean. Let's see. In driver. That's what it's called. Thank you very much. Yes, in driver, and we make an offer, and drivers bid for the ride by accepting the price. We offer drivers a higher price. It's like an auction. Yes, but me personally, I just feel uncomfortable using it, John. If I was ever to use the application, I would volunteer a price that is in line with what I've paid with Uber, for example. And also keep in mind that InDriver is an application that only accepts cash, as I understand it. There is no insurance involved. If you lose something in the cab, if you leave something behind, there's no security. There's no security. And as much as we dislike all the fees that Uber gives their drivers, we still think, or I still think, that it's a much more solid operation. And this, of course, gets into the business of tipping, which is another hot topic that we should cover and will cover at some point in the near future here at Coffee and Headlines. And that has to do with how much we tip and how much we tip now as opposed to before the pandemic, specifically with Uber, because I know that there are taxes and all kinds of things involved with using the platform. I always use the platform with my credit card, but I always leave both a tip in cash and a tip in the system because I know that the drivers appreciate having the extra cash that they don't have to report or deduct or otherwise have any administration to do with it. Let's see what else. Absolutely true, James. If not every attempt to bargain results in a successful transaction, and that's absolutely true. La-da-dee-da-da. So, exercise kindness. I know that there's a lot of very valuable comments here. I'm trying to focus on the positive ones. Ooh, I've just learned that you can also bargain at the stripper joint. I haven't been to the stripper joint in a long time, but it is good to know that you can also haggle at Spartacus. Too funny. Let's see what else. InDriver. Yes, that's the name of the application. Boom, ba-ding, bam, boom, bam, boom. Boom, ba-ding, bam, boom. It's time for generous tips. Again, we're going to bring up the whole issue of tipping amounts and practices and this, that, and the other. This is very funny. Because a lot of times when we attempt to get a better price on something, we will say something insulting about the product, but we end up buying it. Absolutely. Oh, and this is a very, very valuable. Thank you very much, Dan, because Mexico is all about relationships. You have relationships with several vendors and use them when you want to buy something. In return, they treat us fairly and we don't bargain. Again, we talked about that at the beginning. When the relationship is valuable, then you guard that relationship in the best possible way. When I go to Moro Paraíso, there's this taxi man that I call, and all I say to him is, I need a van for X number of people at X time. And I never argue about the price because I've done this every single time. And in fact, every time I call Francisco, my tocayo, he knows it's me. He knows what I need. He knows that I'm going to go to Moro Paraíso. He knows that there's going to be margaritas involved, and I would not want to drive back even if I had a car. So, I have a relationship with a man. I don't argue with his prices because the relationship is far more important. Um, a good question, probably for Michael. Michael, have you ever bargained with a crocodile? Too funny. Good Lord. And speaking of funny, when are we going to learn about the hand gestures? It's still on my queue. And speaking of funny, tomorrow is Sunday Fun Day. Tomorrow the penis comes back, or peni, or penises. We have three penises that we're going to share tomorrow on Sunday and Fun Day. We're also going to talk about the charming side of Juan Caballos, our wonderful, fearless, worldly man of action who does all the horseback riding tours in El Jorullo, along with other people that are members of his co-op. And I don't know exactly what else we're going to talk about tomorrow during Coffee and Headlines. Oh, and we're going to be broadcasting from Hotel Mercurio, just because we can, and because I want to go back and try my new portable setup with good sound and hopefully no background music. And we'll get to that tomorrow in detail. This brings us to the end of today. I hope you were amused. I hope you had a good time, learned a little bit about what we discussed, and John just left a big article about a big comment on InDriver and how it works and why it works in most cities in Mexico. And yes, it is being used more than Uber. Uber, I think, is going to come to a point in which they're going to have to relook at their fees and figure out whether it continues to be cost effective for people and whatnot. But we'll leave that for another day. Right now, let us stay kind, stay happy, spend money responsibly, stay protected, stay careful, and all these good wishes that we share. And last but certainly not least, stay in touch. Have an amazing Saturday, and I'll see you again tomorrow for no news. No one is sacred, no one is safe. Oh, we have fake news to share tomorrow, of course. And hopefully you'll be there. And if not, hopefully we'll get together again sometime soon. Have a great day.